Chapter 486. From this point of view, some people were simply helping him. However, as some matters approached, Li Hongyuan was more or less a bit abnormal. Others may not have noticed it, but as his pillow, Jingwan was very clear. According to Jingwan's understanding of him, a certain person was someone who treated all the major matters as minor matters, and all the minor matters were not important. Even if there were times when some people angered him, his fluctuating mood would not last for long. It came quickly and went quickly. It was the true portrayal of mood swings. This time, it lasted for an unexpectedly long time. How could Jingwan not find it strange? Jingwan asked him why. Li Hongyuan only said that it was nothing. Jingwan lightly frowned. Once or twice, he was unwilling to tell her. Jingwan felt that it was nothing, but when it happened too many times, it was inevitable that her heart would feel a bit uncomfortable. However, the matters that he kept in his heart were certainly not trivial. Thus, Jingwan felt distressed again. In the end, she could only helplessly sigh and no longer ask. Wife was sensible and considerate, but this was not what Jin Qin Wang wanted. He hoped that she could get to the bottom of it. He felt that there was a tacit understanding between the two. Why was it that on this matter, they were unable to reach an agreement? It was very worrying. In order to make his wife feel more at ease, Li Hongyuan put those matters aside. After all, the world was big, and his wife was the most important. However, even if it was like this, Li Hongyuan did not stop tormenting Fu Yunting recently. Although he had never called him in, Fu Yunting was rather uncomfortable recently. He was inexplicably promoted. Although it was still an idle position, he was dog-tired from morning to night. He did not have a share in the morning court, but he woke up earlier than any other courtier. And at night, he could only return home when it was almost midnight. Sitting in the bathtub, he could fall asleep. The time he could spend in bed was at most 4 shichin. His wife, Madame Wei, was heartbroken, but there was nothing she could do. With the situation in Wu Anho's residence, there were many things that Fu Yunting did not have the right to say no to. Compared to Weisher, Fu Yunting believed that it was the court that was looking for trouble with Wu Anho. Fu Yunting was much clearer that the one who made him this miserable was actually Jin Qin Wang. From when Jin Qin Wang first came knocking on his door until now, there were many things that Fu Yunting could not understand. It was true that Jin Qin Wang had helped Wu Anho Fu a lot, but in all likelihood, he had enmity with him in his previous life. Perhaps he had killed his father and seized his wife, which was why he was hated so much in this life. If he hated him, then he hated him, but he still did not give him a quick death. However, Fu Yunting found joy in the midst of misery. Being squeezed dry like this, his martial arts skills actually improved. To a certain extent, Fu Yunting was the truth. However, the truth was exactly the opposite. It was the other party who had seized his wife. Therefore, the most shameless person was still the living king of hell. In his previous life, he had stolen someone else's wife. In this life, he still bore a grudge against the other party and made him miserable. It was truly unreasonable. When would these days come to an end? Fu Yunting did not think about it. Even if he did, it was useless. He naturally did not think that it would come to an end very soon. Wu Anho Fu was born with martial arts. In the end, the sons of the Fu family would not be able to escape the fate of going to the battlefield. Unless, the entire family was completely wiped out. In Li Hongyuan's previous life, Jingwan sacrificed herself to protect the 2 seedlings of the Fu family. In this life, Li Hongyuan would protect the entire Wu Anho Fu. Not only that, Fu Yunting would not want his life. Instead, he would want Fu Yunting to work for him for the rest of his life. Just like He Zhihai, when some battles arose, they would not end so easily like in the previous life. They would either die on the battlefield or die of old age on the battlefield. Therefore, it could be said that the living king of hell was actually perverted to the point that he was not human. When the horse race was in full swing in the manor, an urgent report was delivered to Luchingdi's imperial desk from 800 miles away. At the northwest border, the western Xiongnu and northern Xiongnu armies had joined forces to invade. In just a few days, they had already conquered half of the prefecture. If they did not send reinforcements immediately, the entire prefecture would fall into enemy hands. Luchingdi was shocked and angry at the same time. He immediately summoned the ministers. Now, it was no longer a question of whether to fight or not, but how to fight, and also the issue of the commanding general, provisions, and so on. The war came too suddenly, there was not even a bit of information before. With this kind of unpreparedness, it was normal for Qi Yuan to fall again and again. The important ministers of the court, both civil and military, gathered at the imperial study at the first moment. After reading the urgent report, they could not help but frown. This matter was indeed very thorny. Even if there were factions that supported war and peace, at this time, the peace faction would not stand out. Think about it, they had already lost almost 2 prefectures. If they still dared to talk about peace, they were afraid that the more moderate Luchingdi would directly slap them to death. Unless it was the kind of ruler who only knew how to enjoy himself and did not care about anything else, otherwise, no emperor would be indifferent to the loss of territory. At this time, the Minister of Revenue did not cry about being poor. After all, last year when Jin Qinhuang went to Jiangnan, he had collected a considerable amount of money for the national treasury. However, provisions were not something that could be solved with money. Fortunately, last year, the entire country was still considered to have good weather. To mobilize provisions was not a difficult matter. It was just that the war had already reached its peak, it was not realistic to have provisions on hand. After confirming the commander-in-chief, immediately heading to the border to stabilize the situation was the most important thing. It was just that who should sit in the position of commander-in-chief was another problem. Qin Tianming and Shen Shuhan had both taken the initiative to volunteer, and the Minister of War was also once an illustrious military general. Now, although he was older than the other 2 by more than 10 years, he was duty-bound to protect the country. Luchingdi was very clear that these people all had their own standpoints. If something went wrong, before the war outside was finished, there would be chaos inside. Therefore, no matter how urgent the war was, he could not casually decide on a candidate. Pass Anzhen's order, start the court. There was no morning court today, and now it was already past the time for the morning court. To start the court at this time, it must be a major event. Those who were still unaware were somewhat anxious. When they saw those officials who usually did not change their expressions, they could not help but feel even more uneasy. The princes who were originally conferred the title of Wang and Li Hongyuan were also notified at the first moment and rushed back on horseback, panting. Soon, the civil and military officials knew what had happened and instantly began to discuss. Regarding the commander-in-chief candidate, Shen is hesitant. Does anyone think that there is a suitable candidate? The people below immediately began to recommend, but in the process of this recommendation, Luchingdi's heart basically had an idea. But it was like this that his brows furrowed tighter and tighter. A suitable candidate, that was not suitable. Luchingdi was secretly annoyed. Sure enough, he was usually too relaxed, causing the hearts of those sons to become bigger and bigger. He was not dead yet, but his team was about to be divided up cleanly. Luchingdi did not express his opinion for a long time, and the people below knew that the emperor was dissatisfied, so the voices gradually died down. From the beginning to the end, the important officials who met Luchingdi in the imperial study basically did not say anything, especially the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, Wan Ruizhong and others. When most of them shut up, Luchingdi finally nodded at them. Your Majesty, the heir apparent of Wuanhou was born in a family of generals. Although he has never led an army, he has a profound family background and I think that he is not bad. Recently, I accidentally saw him and found that he is quite methodical and has the style of his father. Your Majesty, why don't you consider the possibility of letting him lead the army? If Your Majesty is not assured, you can call him to the front and test him. In addition, you can send 2 deputy generals to accompany him to assist the heir apparent of Wuanhou. What do you think, Your Majesty? Wuan Ruizhong said so neither quickly nor slowly. A strange expression flashed across Lu Qingdi's face. He pondered for a moment and said, "Beloved official Ruan's words are reasonable. Come, summon the heir apparent of Wuanhou." The others looked at each other and understood Lu Qingdi's meaning. However, why was it that the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet was highly valued by the Emperor? He was good at dealing with people and had outstanding ability. He was also good at understanding the Emperor's thoughts. It was understandable that people like him could not be easily compared to others. Now, Wuanhou was paralyzed in bed. During the holidays, he was always rewarded. However, Lu Qingdi basically did not summon him. To put it nicely, he sympathized with Wuanhou. However, the entire Marquis mansion was not summoned. Let alone Fu Yunting, the heir apparent of the Marquis mansion was not summoned by the Empress. Was this the treatment of a meritorious official? When Fu Yunting was summoned by the people from the palace, he did not understand why. Afterwards, the eunuch congratulated him with a smile and simply explained the situation. Fu Yunting was surprised. In the depths of his heart, he thought that it was indeed here. His heart inexplicably relaxed. However, although it was said that the Grand Secretary recommended him, Fu Yunting thought of Jin Qin Wang. As for the relationship between the Grand Secretary, who was only loyal to the Emperor, and Jin Qin Wang, he did not want to think about it. Even if he knew, there would be no benefit. Moreover, it had nothing to do with him. When Fu Yunting entered the palace, if it was in the past, he would still hide his incompetence and appropriately show a hedonistic appearance. Now, Fu Yunting was completely himself. At least, he had to make people feel that he was convincing enough. The battlefield changed rapidly and was very dangerous. However, for Wuanhou Mansion, this was an opportunity. Although it was more likely to be a more dangerous path ahead, because the imperial family's attitude towards Wuanhou Mansion was too strange. Even when there was only a group of old, weak, sick and disabled people left, they still did not let them go. Without enough military merits, they would only be destroyed faster. And military merits were often exchanged with the lives of the Fu family. Right now, to be exact, it was him, Fu Yunting. This official Fu Yunting greets the Emperor. Long live the Emperor. Lu Qingdi sized up Fu Yunting with a heavy gaze. Anyone could see that there was something wrong with Lu Qingdi's emotions. It was not the joy of seeing a young talent, but rather, it was an indescribable feeling. The entire imperial court fell into silence. Fu Yunting quietly knelt on one knee with his eyebrows lowered. After a long silence, Lu Qingdi said, "Good, as expected of a son of the Fu family. You are indeed extraordinary. Crown Wuanhou's heir apparent as a first-rank defender general of the state. He will be the commander-in-chief of the resistance against the Xiongnu in the northwest. Today, he will lead 30,000 troops to the northwest in hopes of stabilizing the situation at the border as soon as possible and recapturing the lost territory of Qiyuan." There were no more tests. The decision was made so hastily. As a result, even Wan Ruizhong, who was the one who recommended, couldn't help but frown. It seemed that Jin Qin Wang was right. The Emperor had more opinions about Wuanhou's residents than expected. This was not as simple as superior merits overshadowing the master. After all, the achievements of the Fu family had been in the past for a long time. Wuanho's residents really had nothing to fear now. However, the emperor's performance was not like that. Although, in the eyes of many, the emperor was particularly responsible for Wuanho's residents. Thank you for your kindness, this official will not disappoint the emperor. What others could see, Fu Yunting was not blinded by the situation and accepted it very calmly. Without relatives or friends, how could there be limitless favor? If it exceeded the limit, it would be overpraising. Later, Luqingdi appointed several young generals, but it was different from the assistants of the deputy generals mentioned before. Being young meant being hot-blooded and energetic, but it also meant being reckless and impulsive and disobedient. The situation at the border was extremely urgent. The emperor's current actions were simply child's play. However, Luqingdi was full of reasons. These were the pillars of Qi Yuan. He believed that they would be able to beat back the enemy. A group of people who had basically never been in contact with war. Even if they had learned a lot, it was all armchair strategy. Without the guidance of experienced generals, this was the first time they'd entered the battlefield. This was no longer a matter of trust. More people felt that it was inappropriate. Just as they were about to speak, Luqingdi directly stood up. It's decided. The matter of the provisions will be handed over to the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of War. Kong Qinwang, Rui Qinwang, and Gong Qinwang will jointly handle it. Leave. Clearly, the atmosphere was so heavy at the beginning. Everyone knew that it was imminent. But in such a short time, the matter was over. What people felt was only carelessness. It was better to say that the beginning was strong but the ending was weak. Even Luqingdi's sons frowned. They couldn't find a place to resolve their doubts. One after another, they went to the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, hoping that he could give them a satisfactory answer. Ruan Rui was also in the clouds, so he naturally fooled everyone. In a place where no one noticed, Ruan Rui and Luo Peishan looked at each other. Their hands moved, reaching a tacit understanding. After the two ministers returned home, they went to find the people that Jin Qinwang left in their fu. In the current situation, if they didn't see Jin Qinwang, their hearts would be uneasy. Originally, they just wanted Jin Qinwang to make preparations and arrange a time to meet. But they didn't expect that just by turning around, it seemed that Jin Qinwang had already expected that they would want to see him. Dressed in casual clothes, they didn't even disguise themselves. Just like that, they went out. On their respective carriages, they coincidentally met Yu Zhongqing, who was about to leave the city. Yu Zhongqing, under the emperor's order, conveyed the verbal order to Jin Qinwang. The two people couldn't help but feel nervous, their palms sweating. Then, they found that the commander of the Imperial Guards was intentionally or unintentionally covering for them. Then, so easily, without attracting any attention, they went out of the city and went straight to Jin Qinwang's manor. When they arrived at the manor, just as the two of them were hesitating whether or not they should get off the carriage, Yu Zhongqing spoke first from outside. This lowly official is about to meet Wang Yi. Does Lord Wan and Lord Luo wish to travel with this lowly official? This had already pointed out their identities. Naturally, there was nothing to be worried about. After getting off the carriage, the three parties greeted each other with tacit understanding. As for the thoughts of, as expected of Jin Qinwang, in their hearts, there was no need to say it out loud. Muan personally led the way. When they walked through the secret passage, they could even clearly hear the clamor from the horse farm. It was still Li Hongyuan's private room with the other brothers, but this time, there was only Li Hongyuan and Jingwan inside. That's right, Jingwan was also there. Seeing Jingwan, not to mention Ruan Rui Zhong, even Luo Peishan was surprised. It was Yu Zhongqing who accepted it the most. Jingwan also didn't know what her husband was thinking, to challenge the tolerance of a court official. She could only keep a smile, sit quietly, and assume an unfathomable posture. Sit. First, tell Ben Wang, what was Fu Wang's reaction after appointing Fu Yunting as the commander-in-chief? Jin Qin Wang's actions had always been difficult to figure out. He had already asked, so naturally, he couldn't be hemming and hawing. The three people respectively gave Jin Qin Wang an answer from their own point of view. And because Yu Zhongqing was the closest to Luqingdi, and at the same time, he also saw some things after the tide receded, so he spoke more clearly. Everything, when put together, could be summed up in 3 words: something was wrong. Li Hongyuan was silent for a moment. So, perhaps only the successive emperors of Qi Yuan knew the reason for the imperial family's strange attitude towards Wu Anho's residence. Then, to be more precise, it should be the Qi Yuan emperor's strange attitude towards Wu Anho's residence. If there was no reason for this, even ghosts wouldn't believe it. Who was appointed as the deputy general? The emperor didn't appoint a deputy general, but a few young generals. https://11/11807/1235948 Chapter 487. Jingwan listened quietly. How could she not notice something was wrong? She was extremely puzzled. Although Luqingdi was a little mediocre, there was nothing wrong with his brain. Why would he do such a thing to disregard Qiyuan's safety? Under Li Hongyuan's instructions, Yu Zhongqing explained everything that happened today. Ruan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan filled in the gaps. Since it's settled, let's leave it at that. We'll deal with it later. Li Hongyuan said. Your Highness, this matter concerns the country. I don't know why His Majesty would do such a ridiculous thing. How could he, Lord Ruan? His Majesty is the ruler. We are his subjects, and so is your Highness. Even if Lord Ruan is anxious about some things, he has to take it slow. Luo Peishan comforted him. Ruan Ruizhong exhaled. Your Highness, please forgive me. I was too anxious. Lord Ruan cares about the country and the people. It's understandable. However, things are not that bad. After all, this is his country. No matter how joking he is, he has to think about how to explain it to his ancestors in 100 years. Since it was different from his previous life, and he only wanted to destroy Fu Yunting and the entire Wu and Marquis household, now that Fu Yunting was young and handsome, his desire to kill was even stronger. Hence, he changed his strategy. If there was a problem at the start of the war, then he would naturally be able to punish the commander-in-chief and replace him with a capable general. Then, his goal would naturally be achieved. In his previous life, it could be said that he had the same plan, but in the end, he underestimated Fu Yunting. In the end, he did such a crazy thing like sacrificing over 200,000 soldiers. Furthermore, the Fu family used to be very famous, far surpassing the current He family. Fu Yunting is the head of the household. How can he be indifferent to the situation of the Wu and Marquis household? He is very clear in his heart that the Fu family can only advance and not retreat. Hence, how can he not be prepared? I was wrong. Since His Highness thinks highly of him, he can't be bad. However, since the prince mentioned the He family, could he persuade the emperor to allow the He family's youngest son to accompany them? The He family's young master has made outstanding contributions in the Northeast War. This is also something that everyone knows, Ruan Ruizhong said. In the end, no matter what Li Hongyuan said, Fu Yunting was too young. As the saying went, inexperienced people can't do things reliably. He did not have He Zhihai's solid achievements that made people believe in him. In the end, he was not at ease. It was not that he did not believe in Li Hongyuan, but that he did not believe in Fu Yunting. If he wants Fu Yunting dead and Wu Anho destroyed, how could he possibly get involved with He Zhihai, who has a promising future? Lord Ruan should just focus on governing the country. You don't have to worry about things like pacifying the country. Li Hongyuan picked up the teacup beside him and took a sip. When these words came out, it was not only Ruan Ruizhong who was surprised. Although Lu Qingdi's attitude was strange, they did not think that he would have such thoughts. Could it be that Jin Qinhuang was wrong? It was impossible. They had seen Jin Qinhuang's monstrous wisdom more than once, his sky-reaching methods. The things that he was certain of certainly would not be wrong. Why did the emperor say that he wanted to destroy the Fu family? For the sake of Qiyuan, the Fu family had suffered countless casualties. In the end, only Fu Yunting was left to barely hold the family together. No matter how one looked at it, the emperor should treat the Fu family well. But the things that the emperor did were just to fool the people. To the court officials, to the noble families, he didn't even bother to cover it up. Sometimes, he simply hoped that anyone could step on the Wu and Marquis Fu. How preposterous, how chilling. But, all of this, what is the reason? Why, Li Hongyuan also wanted to know the reason. In the Li imperial clan, is there a rumor similar to, the emperor passes on several generations, Fu replaces Li Xing? Jingwan, who was quietly being a wallflower, couldn't help but open her mouth. Li Hongyuan was startled. Together with the others, they all looked at her. Jingwan felt the pressure and shifted a bit uncomfortably. Her smile was a bit awkward. I was just casually saying it. Of course, you can't take it seriously. Jingwan pursed her lips and inwardly scolded herself for having a bad mouth. Such words, how could she casually say it? If she didn't pay attention, then it could really bring disaster to Wu Anho. However, Li Hongyuan suddenly clapped his hands and laughed. Wan is indeed smart. Although it is absurd, this explanation is the most reasonable. After Li Hongyuan finished laughing, he supported his head with one hand. As one of the 4 dukes and 9 marquises of the past, the Fu clan was established through martial prowess from the very beginning. They had countless talented generals, and since the establishment of the Qiyuan dynasty, the Fu clan had never had a lapse in their military prowess before the current Marquis of Wu An's health. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were the stabilizing force of the Qiyuan dynasty. Logically speaking, such a clan should have always been the head of the nobility. However, the reality was that the Fu clan had always been suppressed by the people on the throne. Every time they won a major battle, they would appear to be blooming on the surface, but internally, they would be weakened by 30%. However, once the Fu clan showed any signs of impropriety, they would immediately be severely punished. If it wasn't for the persistence of the Fu clan, who used the lives of generations after generations of the Fu clan, I'm afraid that the Fu clan would have been destroyed a long time ago. However, this kind of bravery and fearlessness made the people on the throne even more wary. Holding power means death, but without power, death is even faster. Therefore, it was not that the Fu family wanted to control the military power of the Qiyuan. They were forced to do so because they had no other choice. Now that they were at the end of the road, Lu Qingdi did not want to scheme against them again. He wanted to crush this cockroach openly and not damage his own reputation at all. Everyone fell silent for a moment. Obviously, everyone accepted this explanation. Although they did not know the exact reason, they were certain that the Fu family had threatened the royal family. Speaking of which, this kind of thing was actually nonsense. However, it might not be groundless. The Fu family must have had some intentions at the very beginning, or they must have offended some ruthless person. That was why they were plotted against like this. In fact, the people on the throne might not really believe it. However, when it came to the throne, it was a taboo among taboos. Not to mention a shadow, even a word from the Fu family would be eradicated. It was just that the Fu family's bones were too strong, and their vitality was too strong. How did Wan come up with this idea? Li Hongyuan asked curiously. How did he come up with this idea? He did not know if there was such a story in the history of his previous life, but there was such a story in the TV series. When he heard Luqingdi's strange attitude, he somehow connected the dots. I just suddenly thought of it. Jingwan felt a little guilty. She could not use words to cover up this kind of thing. After all, no one would have the guts to write a story. I don't think there is any evidence for this kind of thing. Maybe it was passed down by the emperors of the Qi Yuan, so there is no need to investigate. However, I have to protect the person he wants to kill. If the Fu family can use him well, he will be a good weapon. Because of the doubts in his heart, he did not know how to deal with some things. However, it was different now. He knew what to do and he would not be afraid of doing it. Li Hongyuan's eyes finally landed on Yu Zhongqing. What message did he ask you to pass on to me? The emperor said that he has been very busy recently, so he asked you to behave yourself. I am really restless. The Qi Yuan has been in chaos for a long time, and he can no longer keep his throne. Li Hongyuan said calmly. The others lowered their eyes and pretended not to hear anything. However, he was not boasting shamelessly. It was the truth. All right, all of you can go back. Since he wants to use this opportunity to kill Fu Yunting, you can use this opportunity to replace the people in the Ministry of Revenue. In this life, with Li Hongyuan's early training of Fu Yunting, it was believed that compared to the previous life, Fu Yunting would be able to grasp the situation at the border faster. Moreover, without the obstruction of the Deputy General, that group of young generals would only be Fu Yunting's food. In the end, they might even become Fu Yunting's loyal followers. If the situation at the border did not develop as Luqingdi expected, it would be the same as the previous life and they would tamper with the provisions. This would give them an opportunity. Even if the people in the Ministry of Revenue received Luqingdi's instructions, Luqingdi himself would not dare to protect them because he could not explain it clearly. Therefore, he could only pinch his nose and let the Ministry of Revenue take the blame. This was very good, he had ruthlessly dug a hole for his other sons. Therefore, no matter who you were, when you went against Jin Qin Wang, you would have already fallen before you knew the real culprit behind the scenes. Ruan Ruizhong, Luo Peishan, and Yu Zhongqing left soon after. Jingwan, who had been sitting upright, relaxed a bit. She was not used to this kind of atmosphere. Li Hongyuan smiled. Wan should get used to this kind of thing earlier. Get used to it earlier. How can I, a woman of the inner residence, participate in the matters outside? Wan, you don't have to say one thing and mean another in front of your husband. Now that so many things are handled by you, is it not considered participating in the matters outside? Dealing with it in private and participating in it in front of the court officials are two completely different things. Jingwan directly ignored a certain person's previous sentence. What's the difference in essence? Alright, since a certain person did not care, why should she care? In any case, the court officials would not nag in front of her. Li Hongyuan continued to do things his own way. The words that Luqingdi had Yu Zhongqing bring over, to him, could not even be considered as wind that passed one's ears. In any case, he must not dampen his wife's mood. In the matter of the Bai family, don't think that Li Hongyuan was completely targeting the Bai family. Based on his understanding of Luqingdi, that man definitely wanted to let Jingwan take the blame for everything. According to Li Hongyuan's temperament, this kind of thing was even more serious than stripping him of his nobility. Even if it was a matter of face, he would not give him any face. Therefore, the horse race was still in full swing. The next day, after gathering the troops and horses, Fu Yunting put on the armor that belonged to his father. There were countless marks on it, but there was nothing wrong with it. Obviously, it had been carefully maintained all year round. Riding on a tall horse, he looked extraordinarily handsome. Many people might have seen him like this for the first time. At this moment, everyone's impression of him quietly changed. When it came to face, Lu Qingdi had done everything. Standing on the city wall with the civil and military officials, he spoke touching and encouraging words with a little bit of expectation. He even gave Fu Yunting an imperial edict on the spot. That imperial edict was enough to mobilize the Northwest Border Army and the garrison troops of the neighboring counties. The total number of troops added up to 300,000. At this point, if Fu Yunting still lost, he would definitely be condemned by everyone, and even be called the shame of the Fu family. Regarding this point, Fu Yunting was very clear in his heart. However, Fu Yunting did not pay attention to these things. Instead, he paid attention to his family. His paralyzed uncle, his widowed mother, aunts, sister-in-law, and his only 3 nephews and nieces, as well as his own wife and children. A group of old, weak, sick, and disabled people, but they were also his concern. They were engraved in his bones and absolutely could not be abandoned. From beginning to end, he persevered and gritted his teeth to face all the reasons for the humiliation and hardship. Usually, they almost never went out, but at this time, they were all gathered here. Perhaps it was a farewell, or perhaps it was a farewell. Their eyes were clearly reluctant to part, but no one spoke to urge them to stay. They just looked, and shed tears. Fu Yunting's eyes were slightly red, but he became more determined. He pulled the reins, and rode away. No matter how Jin Qinhuang treated him, in his heart, he was actually grateful towards Jin Qinhuang. The Fu family knew what the imperial family's attitude towards them was. It was not that they did not resent, it was not that they did not hate, but the elders always said that they had a clear conscience and that they were doing it for the common people of the world. Who did not understand righteousness, but looking at his own family, his father's generation did it for the common people of the world, but who did it for them? Therefore, when Jin Qinhuang came to find him, he swore that no matter what, as long as he could keep his family safe, he would sell his life to him. Last night, he had already received a promise from Jin Qinhuang, so now, even if the road ahead was unknown, his heart was at peace. In the billowing dust cloud, the common people were still sending them off. Perhaps, in their eyes, with such a mighty lion, Qi Yuan had already won. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan were also sitting in the carriage. The curtain of the carriage was half lifted, and Jingwan's gaze fell on the people of Wu Anho's residence. She was speechless. It's just nonsense. Does the emperor feel uneasy after going to this extent? Li Hongyuan tilted his head and looked at Jingwan. In the previous life, and also today, there was no Wei Shi in the Fu family, only Luo Shi, and there was no Wu Anho now. The one who came out was not Wu Anho's heir, but the new Wu Anho. Fu Yunting did not have a son, and he and his brothers stood behind the man on the throne. However, looking at Wanwan's current expression, perhaps he could roughly guess how Wanwan felt at that time. Come to think of it, it was not much different. After all, at this time in the previous life, he had not been married to Fu Yunting for a long time, and they had not consummated their marriage, so there were no feelings between them. More importantly, he was an outsider, and that kind of complicated feeling was hard to describe. Now that he thought about it, in the previous life, Jingwan saw through the reason why the man on the throne treated the Fu family. Just like yesterday, that was why he was trapped in the Fu family and could not escape. Chapter 488. Jingwan looked at it for a moment and retracted her gaze. Wu Anho Fu had already fallen to this point, it was useless to think more. As a certain person said, they could only slowly plan. They had to stake the safety of Qi Yuan, the lives of countless people, and perhaps even the 300,000 soldiers to form a game. The one who started the game was Lu Qingdi. Although he had set up a trap to kill Fu Yunting, Jin Qinhuang had interfered. Lu Qingdi was unaware that the situation had quietly changed. However, no matter what, people would die in a war. Ah Yuan. Jingwan's gaze had just landed on Li Hongyuan when she clearly felt that something was wrong with him. She couldn't help but think of his strange situation last time at the village. Jingwan immediately leaned over and reached out to hold his face, forcing him to face her. Ah Yuan, Ah Yuan. Li Hongyuan returned to his senses and the negative emotions in his eyes quickly dissipated. He held Jingwan's hand and very naturally kissed her on the lips. It's nothing. In fact, Li Hongyuan was always quite dangerous at this time. No one dared to approach him. Only Jingwan could be so unscrupulous. However, regarding the matter of danger, Jingwan might not know for the rest of her life. Jingwan pursed her lips and was slightly hesitant. Does Ah Yuan have anything to say to me? Although she finally asked, it was still vague. Li Hongyuan chuckled, then Wan, what do you want to know? Ask. No matter what you ask, this husband will tell you everything he knows. Ask? Ask what? How to ask? Instead of telling the truth, she had to play this kind of question and answer game. It was really annoying. Let's talk about it later. This is not the place to talk. Jingwan once again chose to be an ostrich. Perhaps, in her heart, secrets needed to be exchanged with secrets. It was not that she could not let the other party know about her personal matters, but when it came to it, she could not help but show her timidity. After all, traveling through time and space was not a trivial matter. She was not sure what kind of attitude her husband would have. In the end, life was too comfortable. She was addicted and greedy. Li Hongyuan gently stroked the side of Jingwan's face. It's indeed not the place to talk, but if Wan wants to, we can talk anytime. Jingwan smiled and leaned on Li Hongyuan's body. Smelling the unique scent on his body, her eyes unconsciously filled with a sense of attachment. The curtains of the carriage had already been considerately put down by the people outside to prevent their master from doing something inappropriate in broad daylight. These people were also worried to death. Just as he was about to return to the mansion, Lu Qingdi's personal servant came over, trembling with fear. Bodyguard Qian gently knocked on the edge of the carriage. Your Highness, His Majesty wants to see you. Li Hongyuan was holding Jingwan in his arms and whispering in her ear. When he heard this, his face turned cold. Let's go back. The meaning could not be more obvious. He did not want to see them. The servant watched the carriage leave, but did not dare to reach out to stop it. He braced himself and went back to report. This evil creature. Lu Qingdi was so angry that he almost fainted. If it wasn't for the fact that he still had reason, Lu Qingdi might have already gone straight to the door, brought out his father's prestige, and fiercely reprimanded him. In fact, don't even mention putting it into action. If he really went to the door, he reckoned that he would only be angered even more. The other princes who were conferred the title of Wang, as well as the other court officials, each and every one of them looked down and pretended that they did not know anything. In any case, the matter between this father and son, no one else could meddle. If they meddled, they would not be able to gain any benefits, but it was more likely that Lu Qingdi would shift the flames of war. To them, Lu Qingdi would not just reprimand them. Although Lu Qingdi might not scold them so fiercely, but other things would not be as indifferent as to Qin Wang. They might not be able to eat the consequences. Lu Qingdi scolded for a full quarter of an hour without taking a break. It could be said that he was full of energy. TSK, the emperor scolding Qin Wang more had its benefits. Not to mention other things, his spirit was completely different. Usually, they would not see him so well. After scolding until his mouth and tongue were dry, Lu Qingdi flung his sleeve, arranged the carriage to return to the palace. Returning to the Wangfu, this was a secret and safe place for Li Hongyuan. Jingwan looked for something to do. Obviously, the previous topic in the carriage seemed to have been forgotten. On the surface, Li Hongyuan seemed to follow her wishes, but in reality, it was probably not the case. In any case, there is nothing that must be done. It is better to go to the study. Li Hongyuan did not allow for an explanation. He half unyieldingly brought Jingwan into the study. Then, he directly spread out the paper, dipped it in ink and began to draw on the paper. Li Hongyuan's movements were very fast. And with one look, one could tell that it was not a freehand painting, but a meticulous brush. With just a few strokes, the outline of a woman appeared. Gradually, Jingwan was entranced. Although it was just a silhouette, but this figure was grasped very accurately. If it was not her, who else could it be? Although Li Hongyuan had been learning meticulous brushwork for some time, it was obvious that Jingwan had not seen him draw a portrait. All the outlines of the woman appeared vividly on the paper. Then, he began to color. Almost without thinking, Li Hongyuan found the color that he needed from the various paints. The speed at which he mixed the colors was also very fast. It could be said that he was faster than Jingwan, the original creator. The color that he mixed was also very beautiful. The dyeing effect was indescribably satisfying. However, as time passed, Jingwan became more and more silent. Li Hongyuan's painting took more than 2 hours, and the whole painting was basically completed. It was lively and full of charm. It was not exaggerated, but anyone who saw the painting would probably be moved by the woman in the painting. It was her, but it also seemed like it was not her. Jingwan thought that even if she was given another 10 years, she would not be able to reach such a level. After all, these things were also dependent on talent. However, this was not the main point. The main point was that a certain someone's talent was a little too good. Moreover, rather than calling it talent, it was better to call it familiarity. The kind of familiarity that was ingrained into the bones. There was no need to think, and it was completely at the will of the heart. What existed in the heart was simply engraved. For it to be so deep to such an extent, it was unknown how many strokes were drawn. Some things, even if one wanted to deceive oneself and others, seemed to be impossible at this moment. Li Hongyuan hung the brush on the pen holder and looked at Jingwan. His eyes were still gentle and affectionate. "Wan, do you have anything you want to ask?" Jingwan clutched the handkerchief in her hand and looked straight at Li Hongyuan. The expression in her eyes was indescribable. Some things were not difficult to guess because one had experienced it. After all, if one had not experienced it, one would think that it was a fantasy when one heard it from others, let alone think about it. "Ah, Yuan, you have met me before, right? The kind that has a deep connection with me." Li Hongyuan nodded gently. "Yes." "When?" Jingwan clenched the handkerchief so tightly that her fingertips began to turn white. Li Hongyuan clearly felt that Jingwan's mood was not right. It was not quite what he expected. He looked at her without blinking and tried to appear as gentle as possible. He suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and even thought about whether to end this topic and use other reasons to avoid it. The living king of hell, who had always been carefree, nothing could stop him from moving forward. However, at this moment, he was hesitating. However, the matter had already reached this point, and it could not be resolved just by beating around the bush. The problem that existed in the bottom of their hearts might instead become a barrier between them. Once the barrier was enlarged, it might never be able to be repaired again. Li Hongyuan's eyes darkened, but he did not show any abnormality. Past life. However, the meaning of this past life may not be the same as usual. The same Qi Yuan, the same person, but there are many differences. For example, Wan is not my wife. So, the person you love is not me at all, but the person in your memory who is exactly the same as me. Jingwan suddenly became excited. Rebirth, no wonder. In this case, many things could be explained clearly. It was like a game, and only he, Li Hongyuan, could load the file and start over. The others did not have this honor. Therefore, his strange attitude towards her at the beginning and his calling of Wan Wan at the beginning was all because of her, and also not because of her. She was not a substitute, and she was a substitute. Jing Wan stood up abruptly and turned to leave. Li Hongyuan reacted quickly and grabbed her. He did not expect that the problem would appear in the most unexpected place. Wan Wan, why would you think that? What do you mean by the person who is exactly the same as you? You are in that book. It was originally me. Jing Wan sneered, in my memory, you treated me well and your feelings for me were all inexplicable. It couldn't even be considered love at first sight. I didn't know anything about it and I didn't participate in it at all. Now, you're implicating me and saying that it was me. If it were you, what would you think? Li Hongyuan probably understood the crux of the problem. Thinking about Jingwan's attitude towards love, it seemed that it was not difficult for him to understand the reason for her attitude. Wan Wan, you can't be like this. You can't deny my feelings for you completely just because you don't know. If your highness didn't have a second chance, I think your highness wouldn't have such deep feelings for me. Yes, that's right. If I didn't do it all over again, we would still be in our previous lives. At this time, you were married and we didn't have any interactions at all. Everything developed according to plan. Then, you were deeply involved in the Wu and Marquis household. In order not to implicate the Luo family, you defiled yourself and asked to be removed from the clan. Your grandfather was sad because of you, your grandmother cried until she was blind. You worked hard for the Wu and Marquis household and the Luo family secretly helped you. They were almost discovered and their entire family was wiped out. As for me, I was completely deceived. I was poisoned when I was only 10 years old and was judged to not live past 30. Then, a few months later, when I found out about everything, I was assassinated in all sorts of ways and had to escape from the capital in a sorry state. When I was on the brink of death, I was pulled back by you when I was in despair. I fought for the throne in a situation where I had nothing and couldn't save the Fu family in time. I couldn't protect you and could only watch as you died in my arms. This made me go crazy and massacre the entire capital. This is what you participated in, but also didn't. Jingwan was so shocked that she was speechless. In her mind, even if things were different from the previous life that she didn't know about, it wouldn't be too different. Wan Wan, you can't be so cruel. You can't completely deny my feelings for you just because you didn't know about it and didn't participate in it. Maybe in your eyes, my feelings for you are ridiculous, but in my heart, there has always been only you. There is no one else other than you. When I came back, I was 10 years old and you were 2 years old. Although I was trapped in the palace, if I wanted you to come to the capital early, it was not impossible. But I knew the influence of environment on a person, so I suppressed myself and allowed you to grow up according to your original path. You wouldn't know how painful it was if you didn't experience it for yourself. You don't know about it. After I came back, do you know how lucky I was? Even if I had to change my fate and risk universal condemnation, I still wanted you to live a happy and healthy life. So, Wan Wan, don't do this to me. You are gouging my heart out and taking my life. The insufferably arrogant king of hell showed an unprecedented vulnerability. His eyes were red, as if he would cry at any time. Jingwan looked at him in a daze, completely speechless. Li Hongyuan hugged her tightly in his arms. In a place where Jingwan could not see, there was no trace of weakness, only determination and craziness. However, his voice was still as gentle as ever. Wan Wan, you don't think I like you, but I feel that I've loved you for more than 2 lifetimes. You're the one who's unfair to me. You're the one who doesn't know that you owe me. No matter what you think, you can only be mine in life and mine in death. You can't escape. If you have the slightest thought of leaving me, I will lock you up in a place where only I exist. Do you know, in fact, I wanted to do this for a long time, but I was afraid that you would be unhappy. I was afraid of hurting you. So, Wan, don't give me the chance to go crazy. Jingwan raised her head and rested her chin on Li Hongyuan's shoulder. Her face was already covered in tears. Regardless of whether she cared about being treated as a substitute or not, she had to admit that her heart ached for this man. It was said that the one who always remembered was the most painful. If everything was as he said, then he had always been the one working hard, and he had always been bearing everything. Jingwan felt that perhaps she could treat those days that she didn't know about as his lost memories. It seemed that it wasn't difficult to accept that the one in his memory was her. You owe me, you don't love me. Li Hongyuan was still complaining about her heartlessness. As he spoke, he seemed to be unable to continue. Wan, how about this? If you think that it's not you, then give me a chance. Let's start over. You weren't my wife in our previous life, and I also had a princess consort. I had more than one woman. But in this life, I only want you, and you will always be the only one. What do you think? It seemed that as long as he could keep her, he could endure, he could compromise, he could do anything. Chapter 489. Okay. Unconsciously, this word came out of Jingwan's mouth. After a moment, Jingwan slowly reached out and hugged Li Hongyuan's waist. She knew very well that this man was not wrong in this matter. She should not have questioned his feelings for her and hurt him. She was the one who went into a dead end. However, things like feelings could not be controlled by reason. Because she cared, she was worried about gains and losses. Because she loved deeply, she could not tolerate any flaws. Even if it was herself, she could overturn the vinegar jar. At this moment, Jingwan also deeply realized that she was really, completely in love with this man. There were many things that she could no longer retreat from. However, the malice in Li Hongyuan's eyes did not dissipate because of Jingwan's words. Instead, it became stronger. He had never been a generous person. On the contrary, he was very narrow-minded and greedy. There was no doubt that Wan loved him now. But it was not enough. At least, she would love him no matter what and would not have the slightest thought of leaving him. He wanted everything, he wanted absolute. Wan won't leave me, right? No matter what his face was and what emotions were in his eyes, his voice was still cautious and there was a trace of grievance. Jingwan's heart ached again. She gently stroked Li Hongyuan's back. Of course not. But just now, I just started, and Wan got up and wanted to leave. Did you ever care about my feelings? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I'm just very flustered and scared. I'm scared that you don't love me, and I'm scared that I'll break down if I continue to stay here. I don't want to lose my last bit of self-respect when I find out that I've never received your love. Obviously, I'm wrong. Fortunately, you pulled me back. Forgive me, okay? I promise. As long as Wan doesn't want to leave me, you can do anything. Li Hongyuan seemed to put himself in the lowest position. Silly. We are husband and wife, and you are a prince. As your princess, where can I go? Don't overthink it. Could it be that in Wan's eyes, you're only forced to stay because of your rebirth? Li Hongyuan let go of Jingwan, grabbed her shoulder, and stared at her. His eyes were red, and he seemed to be very agitated. If it was any other time, Jingwan would have secretly rolled her eyes at him and complained in her heart when she saw him acting up. But now, it was completely different. She also understood the reason why he would be neurotic from time to time. It was because the shadow left behind by his previous life was too heavy. So, even the slightest movement could make him uneasy. It was her fault. She didn't realize that he was always uneasy. It was her fault. She didn't do enough to make him calm down. That's not what I meant. I just wanted to tell you that I can't leave you. Ah, Yuan, where you are, is where my heart belongs. Li Hongyuan's emotions calmed down a little. He pulled Jing Wan into his arms again. Wan, I've said it before. If I have a change of heart, you can take my life. But if you have a change of heart, I probably won't kill you. I'll just imprison you for the rest of your life so that I'll be the only one in your life. I don't think anyone wants that kind of life. My heart has been tied to you for a long time. How can I change? I know that there is no way to separate my heart. My feelings from the beginning to the end will not change because of the passage of time. I believe that no one in the world will treat me better than you. Even if there is, I only want you. Li Hongyuan snorted. How can anyone treat you better than me? Yes, I believe it. From this, it could be seen that Jingwan's emotions were completely led by Li Hongyuan. Because he showed weakness, because he leaked a little bit of his emotions, Jingwan completely couldn't care about herself. She only wanted to appease him and follow his lead. It was obvious that in her heart, everything about him surpassed her. The simplest point was, did she still remember her initial emotions? Therefore, in the face of such a scheming Jin Qin Wang, how could Jingwan be his opponent? In this relationship, it seemed that she was in the lead, but in reality, she had always been in the palm of his hand. How could she escape from that range? However, although Li Hongyuan played tricks, but what tied Jingwan down was still that true feeling. Thus, even if Jingwan was a little silly, it didn't matter. Wang Fei, do you want more tea? Because there was no movement for a long time, Gong Mama timely opened her mouth. Obviously, in their current atmosphere, having a third person to ease it was also good. At least it could calm them down a little. Jingwan withdrew from Li Hongyuan's arms and sat to one side. She lowered her head and used a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes. And the current Li Hongyuan, other than Jingwan, no one could make him reveal any special emotions. Even if there were 8 or 9 out of 10, it was just an act. At this time, there were no emotions. With an outsider, it was absolutely easy to control. Come in. Gong Mama came in and quickly changed the hot tea. Her gaze very obscurely swept across Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's faces. What kind of eyesight did she have? Sure enough, did they quarrel? Before they entered the study, Li Hongyuan ordered everyone to retreat far away. Without permission, no one was allowed to approach. For more than 2 shichin, everything was fine. Suddenly, there was movement from behind. Because it was far away, only slight sounds could be heard. However, no one dared to approach. I'll take my leave. After that, Li Hongyuan poured a cup of warm tea for Jingwan. He stood in front of Jingwan and gently wiped his fingers under her eyes. Drink some water. Jingwan raised her head and looked at him. She hummed softly and took the cup. She took a sip. Wan, you can ask me anything you want to know. I can tell you everything. Jingwan opened her mouth. It seemed that there were many things she wanted to ask. However, at this moment, there was nothing she wanted to ask. Moreover, it seemed meaningless. From what he said just now, she already knew a lot of things. Those things were really not what she wanted to see. She sighed at the Wu Anho mansion before. On the other hand, she didn't know that she had such a close relationship with that family. However, her family's love for her didn't change. Then, why did she marry into the Wu Anho mansion when she clearly knew what kind of situation they were in? There was also the situation of the Luo family, especially her grandmother. Not to mention experiencing it, Jingwan's heart ached when she thought about it. According to Jingwan's understanding of Li Hongyuan, given his narrow-mindedness, mentioning the Wu Anho mansion was actually a very dangerous topic. Therefore, Jingwan cleverly didn't ask. However, Li Hongyuan's eyes were sharp. Seeing Jingwan's hesitation, he basically knew what she was thinking. His face suddenly darkened. Do you want to know how you married into the Wu Anho mansion? Li Ruyu schemed to make you fall into the water at the Ding General Duke's mansion. Fu Yunting saved you. As for the reason, it seems to have something to do with Sun Yilin. Are you satisfied? In one sentence, he implicated two people in his minefield. Jingwan, who was feeling sorry for him a moment ago, didn't know whether to laugh or cry now. She didn't mention it. It was he who insisted on making trouble. Moreover, according to him, at this time, she didn't have any interaction with this man, okay? How could he blame this on her now? No matter what kind of relationship she had with Fu Yunting in his memory, Fu Yunting actually had nothing to do with her. Hadn't all possibilities been cleanly cut off by this man? Wan is very loyal. Even if she became my woman and gave birth to my son, she still refused to enter the imperial mausoleum because she felt sorry for Fu Yunting. She didn't even enter the Fu family's ancestral grave. Li Hongyuan's face darkened as he spoke, and he started to become irritable again. She still kept Fu Yunting and protected the Fu family. This prince should have destroyed them long ago. Jingwan didn't respond. After all, anything she said could be wrong and make this man's illness worse. She just watched him get angry at himself. However, her expression remained gentle because she instantly understood why this man protected the Fu family. It was because she had once wanted to protect the Fu family. However, she was someone else's wife, but she became his woman and even gave birth to his son. If this man didn't take her by force, he must have threatened her. It was fine if he didn't feel embarrassed after doing such a thing, but he still wanted to cause trouble for others. Jingwan really wanted to know how thick his skin was. Even steel couldn't compare to it. Wan, what are you thinking? Do you think that this prince should protect the Fu family? I'm just thinking that I'm really too stupid to have been schemed against by someone like Li Ruyu, Jingwan said without thinking. He naturally knew what kind of person Jingwan was. He also knew how she would react, and her words didn't match her heart. What she said and what she thought were two completely different things. It wasn't the first time either, so he couldn't be bothered to make a fuss about it. What he really cared about was, stupid. Li Ruyu is an imperial princess after all. She asked someone to throw you into the water without any hesitation. Do you think you can avoid it with your small body? He often said that Jingwan was stupid, but when Jingwan really said that to him, he was unhappy. Therefore, he had already said everything, so it was best to remain silent. Li Hongyuan half knelt down and looked into her eyes. There is one thing that I need Wan to explain to your husband. What is it? Have you ever cared about Fu Yunting? This was actually what Li Hongyuan cared about the most. Jingwan blinked. Should she go along with him, or? Jingwan chose to tell him the truth. Ah, Yuan, you don't make sense. How would I know? When the current emperor of Wu Anho passed away, you married him during the mourning period. You and Fu Yunting did not consummate the marriage. More than a month later, today, Fu Yunting embarked on the journey to the northwest border because he had underestimated Fu Yunting. It was you who went to many places and knelt in front of the palace for several hours to beg for the provisions. Then, you personally delivered them to the border and stayed there until more than 200,000 soldiers died in the Qi Yuan. Fu Yunting was charged with treason and was escorted back to the capital. Everyone in Wu Anho's residence was imprisoned except for you. Only you managed to escape the calamity temporarily. You secretly returned to the capital and tried to save the rest of the Wu Anho's family. When you were at your wits' end, you came to me for help. I admit that I was despicable and shameless. I took the opportunity to take your body, but you were still a virgin at that time. So, tell me, have you ever cared about him? Even if you don't know anything, I'm sure you know the answer to your own situation. Jingwan was silent for a moment. She reached out and covered Li Hongyuan's face with her hand. I can tell you very clearly that I never did. Jingwan knew very well what kind of person she was. She had always been more rational than emotional. It was impossible for her to fall in love at first sight. If what he said was true, then there was no doubt that she might have some very special feelings for Fu Yunting, but it was definitely not the love between a man and a woman. As a legitimate husband and wife, even if the one who insisted on not consummating the marriage was Fu Yunting, she would definitely not allow herself to remain a virgin if she fell in love with him in those days where there was no tomorrow. Moreover, it was obvious that the wars at the border were endless. Everyone might not be able to touch the ground at all. She and Fu Yunting must have only seen each other a few times. How could they develop feelings for each other? However, she would definitely not fall in love with him because of some hero complex. Respect was one thing, but love was another. Li Hongyuan reached out and hugged Jingwan's waist. He buried his head in her arms. Wan, I'm very happy. Really? Jingwan's fingers stroked his hair. She felt a little sad. Even if she did not want to experience those things in his memory, she still missed out on their first meeting. However, this kind of thing was just thinking about it. After all, if she was really someone else's wife, then no matter how good he was to her, she would not indulge herself. She would definitely restrain herself to the end. In the end, it was her current self who had the advantage. She had no burden, no hardship, and she did not need to care about the flowers and plants around him. If she did not experience his life, then even if they became husband and wife, the possibility of them falling in love in the end was extremely low. Because he was a prince. In a feudal society, men's rights were paramount. How could he not sleep with her before marriage and only stay with her after marriage? Although there were regrets, she should be content. This man had experienced too many things that no one knew about. His heart could be said to be riddled with holes. She should cherish him and heal his pain. Jingwan looked at the door in a daze. She suddenly thought of something. Ah Yuan, Nurse Gong was the person you arranged to be by my side. Yes. Li Hongyuan did not deny it. She was originally indebted to the imperial noble consort. She was loyal to the imperial noble consort. Although she later served me, in fact, because of some of my ways of doing things, she did not like it. She just did her duty and nothing more. Look, I sent her to Qi and Manor to serve you for 2 or 3 years. After she came back, as her former master, I had no place in her eyes at all. Jingwan chuckled. She wanted to say that someone deserved it, but she did not have the intention to vent her anger on Nurse Gong. Although Nurse Gong should have passed a lot of information about her to someone, she was now inseparable from this man. She could not get up from being spied on long ago. If she was not moved, she would be more or less angry. However, she would not be furious. After all, Nurse Gong did do her best for her and was sincerely good to her. What about Sister He and Bai Xiao? Were you the one who sent them to me? Yes. However, these 2 people were prepared for you from the beginning. They did not even know who was the one who trained them. There is no other master. Jingwan nodded. You must have meddled in my marriage. Based on your temperament, how could you allow me to be engaged to someone else? Ben Wang's reputation is so bad. If your reputation is not bad, can you marry me? Li Hongyuan answered with righteousness. Your reputation is bad. That is also caused by you. Who is to blame? Ben Wang's reputation is not bad. Is it your turn to be Jin Qinwang's Difei? Jin Qinwang Fu's rear courtyard has long been filled. Li Hongyuan stared at Jingwan with an expression of, who am I doing this for? He was quite dissatisfied with Jingwan's unable to differentiate good from bad. So, you deliberately let me get engaged and then break off the engagement. Just to ruin my reputation. Jingwan was convinced by his logic, it's only 2 times. No matter how bad it is, can it be compared to you? It was originally prepared for 4 times, but Chen Jingmin and Sun Yilin both have deep feelings for you. Li Hongyuan's face became ferocious, his killing intent rising again. He caused trouble himself but took his anger out on others. If she did not have an engagement with those 2 people, even if they had feelings for each other, it would not be deep. After all, if she did not give them hope, then perhaps they would have given up on the idea earlier. Because of this, your plans for the next 2 times were put on hold. He was about to die from jealousy. How could it continue? So I directly went to find your grandfather. In any case, it must be Jin Qinwang Fei's maternal family. It doesn't matter if it is dragged into the water earlier. Jingwan face-bombed, but you did so much. Our marriage was exchanged by me using things. It was a blow to his heart. Regarding this point, Li Hongyuan was very happy. At the same time, it also became the black history of his black history. Seeing that a certain person's face was almost as black as ink, she quickly lowered her head and kissed him. The process is not important, as long as the result is satisfactory. Li Hongyuan's expression became a little better. He was usually such an insufferably arrogant person. He was cold, taciturn, and domineering. In front of her, he was like a child. After that, Jingwan asked about some other things. It was about the many people and things that she cared about. However, Li Hongyuan was vague about many things. He did not say everything he knew without reserve. Those things were basically dark and cruel. Li Hongyuan played tricks to trick Jingwan into feeling pity for him. It was one thing, but he did not want to tell her the things that were really dark. Jingwan also understood that those were things that he was brooding about and could not forget. I'm here, all right. Li Hongyuan naturally understood what she meant, but the Qi Yuan is not settled, the world is not at peace, and the most important thing is that Wan's death calamity has not passed. So, if the overall situation was not settled, his heart would not be at peace. Then, no matter what a Yuan does, think about me more, okay? Moreover, Yuan has done so much and changed so much. There will not be any death calamity. We will all be fine and slowly grow old together. Of course we will be fine. Unknowingly, Li Hongyuan's posture had changed from half-kneeling to sitting on the ground. He leaned his head on Jingwan's lap. There is one more thing that I have to tell Wan. The reason why I came back is because of the imperial noble consort. What Master Liaochen said is basically true. The imperial noble consort is indeed special, but her origin is unknown. Her spirit is indeed still alive, but it is not wandering. Before I came back, she was trapped in the jade pendant that was found in the Jade Essence Palace. After I came back, her spirit entered the body of Qin Shufei, who had the closest fate to her. Last time, when Qin Shufei was poisoned, she temporarily took control of Qin Shufei's body. In order to send me back, she wanted to disperse her spirit. 81 altars were praying for the world's blessings, just to prolong her existence. At least, she could fulfill some of her wishes. Although she had suffered enough today, Jingwan was still shocked. It's a pity that the imperial noble consort fell into your father's hands. If she didn't fall into that man's hands, I wouldn't be here. Li Hongyuan said angrily. Jingwan choked and was speechless. So, the only thing she could do now was to do her best and at least let her die without regrets. There was no room for any mishaps regarding the altars. I've said what I need to say. Now, isn't it your turn to speak, Wan? Jingwan was not surprised by this. After all, when he had nothing, he was able to surpass all his brothers to ascend the throne. In addition, he had similar experiences. How could he not notice? Chapter 490. My situation is different from all Yuan's. With Jingwan's reincarnation as a foundation, it was not that unbelievable that she had transmigrated. She was not worried that he would not be able to accept it. Jingwan organized her thoughts. I came from another place, a place that can never be found here. When a Yuan came back, he transmigrated through time. It's as if time went back. I probably transmigrated through space. Space, how do I explain it? It's like there are two aromatherapy balls. Qi Yuan and everything that can be extended from Qi Yuan are in one bowl. Even if I were to redo my life, it would still be in the same bowl. However, one wand came from the other bowl. Under normal circumstances, the two aromatherapy balls are not connected and cannot touch each other, Li Hongyuan continued. Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan strangely. His ability to understand was amazing. After all, Jingwan did not know what was going on. If she had to explain it, she might not be able to explain it better than this. Jingwan felt that if this man was in her previous life, he probably would not have made a fool of himself just because he was an antique. That's pretty much what I mean. In a sense, you can also think of me as a reincarnation with the memories of my previous life. That place is very different from this place. However, its history is similar to the history of this place and Qi Yuan. The geographical location is also very similar. The era I lived in was very different from the current Qi Yuan. Jingwan said slowly with a hint of nostalgia. Li Hongyuan listened attentively. Although he had expected that the place Jingwan lived in might be very different, the difference was far beyond his imagination. Although he could not accept all of it, there were many things that were worth looking forward to. Wan is talking about the environment she lived in. What about you? You can be together freely. If we are together, we will be together. If we disagree, we will separate. How many men has Wan slept with? Li Hongyuan raised his head and looked at Jingwan. His eyes were dark, and it was obvious that he was going to turn hostile if something went wrong. That's just a way to get to know each other and improve their relationship before marriage. Compared with Yuan having multiple wives and concubines, it doesn't seem to be anything at all, right? Only the magistrate is allowed to set a fire, but the common people are not allowed to light a lamp. Jin Wangye, there is no such thing as you. Jingwan found it funny. Li Hongyuan's expression was terrible, but he knew very well that if he pursued this matter, he would be destroying their relationship. Moreover, Wan's environment at that time had always been like this. Just like in Qi Yuan now, it was normal for men to have multiple wives and concubines. There was nothing to criticize. Therefore, even if he was unhappy, he could only pinch his nose and accept it. However, I only had one. The most we could do was hold hands. Because I didn't want to have any further contact with him, he separated from me. Jingwan continued to say with a smile. The expression on Li Hongyuan's face immediately turned bright. It's good that they separated. That kind of brat who only thinks about molesting women, what's the point of staying? Wan should have separated from him earlier. Jingwan gently rubbed Li Hongyuan's face with her fingers. She chuckled and did not speak. As long as he was happy, it was fine. So, Wan did not get married. No. In our country, the law has a requirement for the age of marriage. In our country, women are 20 years old. When I left that world, I was already over 20 years old. However, I did not think about getting married. Moreover, there is no rule that states that you have to get married when you reach the age of marriage. Choosing to be single for a lifetime is not a problem. Of course, the premise is that there will be no relatives nagging. Wan's family must be very rich, right? Li Hongyuan knew how the environment affected a person. It shaped a person's temperament and formed a person's behavior and habits. Since Wan was already over 20 years old at that time, many things had already been formed. She had been in the Luo family for more than 10 years. The things that were deeply ingrained in her bones were very difficult to change, especially when Li Hongyuan saw how tenacious and unyielding Jingwan was. The more she was like this, the more difficult it was to change some things. You can say that. After all, I'm also the son of an official. Although the difference between the officials there and Qi Yuan's officials is huge, there are more or less similarities. Moreover, my father's position isn't considered low and is definitely different from ordinary people. He has high expectations for me. After all, at least on the surface, he only has me as his child. He wants to nurture me into the most outstanding socialite so that he can use me to climb up the social ladder. Naturally, I have the best upbringing. Jingwan's expression was indifferent. Obviously, she did not have a good impression of that father. Wan seems to know some things that people with better conditions should not know. Did something happen in her family later? Yes. Jingwan raised her head and sank into her memories with a hint of sadness. He betrayed my mother. He had an affair with another woman and appeared arrogantly in front of my mother. However, my mother originally wanted to divorce him. In that place, it was normal for couples to divorce if they did not get along. After the divorce, both parties could remarry. However, that man was an official, so it was impossible for him to do that. After all, monogamy was the law. It was not easy for my mother to divorce him. After a long tug of war, when the results were about to be out, both of them met with an accident at the same time and died. Only my grandmother and I were left. Not long after that, it was revealed that he had colluded with the bandits. However, he was dead, so everything was over. After all, he would not be implicated, but his family property was seized. Those bandits seemed to have suffered losses because of him. After he died, those bandits naturally found me and my grandmother. I lived a wandering life with my grandmother for a period of time. My grandmother was a woman from a scholarly family and had an excellent upbringing. Because of her earnest teachings, I did not go astray. However, my grandmother's originally healthy body had already collapsed, and she passed away a few years after that. During that time, I lived a very bad life and was muddle-headed. Then one day, I seemed to have suddenly fainted. When I regained consciousness, I knew that the original me was most likely dead and reincarnated, but I seemed to have forgotten to drink Mang Po's soup. I still remember everything from my previous life. Jingwan lowered her head and looked at Li Hongyuan. Her eyes were slightly red. Wan, you have me now. Moreover, the Luo family is also your relatives. Most of them are good people. Li Hongyuan said softly. It was no wonder that she did not like concubines since she was young. She was also particularly disgusted by men who were fickle in relationships. She was particularly close to Madame Luo. I know. In fact, my grandmother in my previous life has already passed away. I have nothing to worry about. My grandmother in my previous life and my grandmother now are quite similar in some ways. It is undeniable that in the beginning, I was close to my grandmother because of the transference of affection. After a long time, my feelings for her are also real. If you miss Madame Luo, you can always take the time to go back and visit her. Oh, you're suddenly so generous. Who was the one who pulled a long face and was unhappy because I stayed in the Luo family for a long time? Jingwan teased. The sadness in her heart dissipated a little. Li Hongyuan snorted coldly. How long can Madame Luo live? In any case, the one who will be by your side for the rest of your life will be me. Jingwan paused. Ah Yuan, thank you. She lowered her head and kissed Li Hongyuan's lips. Just a word of thanks is enough. But other than this, I don't have anything else. After all, I'm yours. I've given you my whole life. These words could be said to have greatly pleased the living king of hell. What do you mean you don't have anything else? I'm not yours. The big Jin Qin Wang Fu isn't yours. Jin Qin Wang, whose sweet talk skill was maxed out, really pleased Jin Qin Wang Fei. Some feelings began to linger again. Jingwan decisively changed the topic. Since Ah Yuan's fine brushwork is so good, why don't we cooperate on a painting? I'll paint you and you paint me, how about it? Painting a portrait of Li Hongyuan could be said to be the peak of Jingwan's fine brushwork. Especially the first portrait, the surreal style. In the future, it would be difficult to surpass that level. Why not? Li Hongyuan got up and pulled Jingwan's wrist, walking behind the table again. You first or me first? Why don't we do it together, one for each person? After each person finishes, the other person will fill in the other half. Let's see whose the final one is more harmonious and perfect. The idea is good. However, if Wan loses, don't cry. Li Hongyuan's slender and powerful fingers scratched the tip of Jingwan's nose. Jingwan lightly patted his hand away. I'm not a person who is jealous of talent, how can I cry? Besides, even if my painting skills are far inferior to yours, but this is not something that can be won by just relying on painting skills. After all, without discussing the layout in advance, any situation can happen. Thus, it is still unknown who will win and who will lose. Is that so? Then this husband will wait and see. Li Hongyuan smiled lightly, handsome and compelling. Jingwan moved her line of sight and curled her lips. Although she had long been accustomed to it, but when it suddenly happened occasionally, it was still unbearable. Li Hongyuan had never cared much about his appearance, but it felt good to be able to mesmerize his wife. Each person occupied half of the table, working separately. Perhaps in order to cooperate with Jingwan, Li Hongyuan deliberately slowed down his speed, and the paper was also smaller. Thus, in the end, it did not take long to finish half of the painting. In the end, they almost stopped at the same time. They looked at each other, and from their expressions, it could be seen that they were quite satisfied. When they saw each other's painting, they were slightly stunned. Then, they looked up at each other and smiled. At this moment, it was really an incomparable tacit understanding. This was because both of their layouts were relatively conventional, and it was easy to add the other half. It was enough to show that they were considerate of each other and did not deliberately think of ways to make things difficult for each other. More coincidentally, the layouts of the two paintings were very similar. In the end, when the paintings were completed, it could be said that it was the same person who painted two similar paintings. However, the other half of the painting should have taken longer than before. In fact, it was not so. It was just as smooth and confident. In this way, they spent half a day in the study. Later, when Nanny Gong came to tidy up the study, she finally calmed down. The princess and the prince did not really quarrel. Nanny Gong did not know how to paint, but she had the ability to appreciate paintings. This painting was obviously done by two people. Although the prince's fine brushwork was beyond her imagination, she did not find it strange. After all, she did not like the prince's style of doing things, but she did not deny that he was extraordinary in all aspects. After that, Mama Gong realized that her Wang Fei's gaze towards her was a little strange. However, she did not try to find out the reason. She did what she was supposed to do. Her gaze did not change. And she strictly adhered to her professional ethics. Jingwan thought to herself, Nanny Gong has been specially trained and is a secret guard. Her composure is not comparable to ordinary people. I used to think that Nanny Gong's temperament was like this, but it turned out that it was not the case. There was a special training in it. Nanny Gong, let the people get ready. We'll go to the Luo family in the afternoon. After hearing what her husband said, even if it wouldn't happen right now, Jingwan still couldn't remain indifferent. It was as if she would not be at ease if she did not take a look. Yes, Your Highness. Nanny Gong replied and prepared to leave. Nanny Gong, does Your Highness have any other orders? In Nanny Gong's impression, Jingwan was slightly hesitant when speaking. That is, you can slowly remove the makeup on your face. Nanny Gong was actually much younger than her face showed, and the shape of her face was also different. It was fine if she did not know before, but now that she knew, there was no reason for her to continue acting like this. Gong Mama paused and immediately reacted. She knew that the princess consort already knew some things. This might be the reason why the prince and the princess consort had argued before. It was obvious that no one liked having a spy around them years ago. However, the prince had still managed to appease the princess consort in the end. Yes. Nanny Gong actually looked similar to the previous female nurse. Under the subtle influence of the female nurse, her current face was actually closer to her original appearance. However, the age difference was there. If she suddenly completely removed the makeup, in the eyes of outsiders, it would definitely be a different person. Therefore, the removal of the makeup would not be done overnight. It would take at least a year and a half. It was not the New Year's Day, and it was not something that happened in the Luo family, but Jin Qinwang brought Jin Qinwang Fei to the Luo family. The Luo family naturally did not understand and worried that something might have happened. With such emotions, old Madame Luo hurriedly led the Luo family out to greet them. Seeing the husband and wife coming down from the carriage without any haze on their faces, old Madame Luo breathed a sigh of relief. However, her heart was not completely at ease. Because she knew that this granddaughter of hers really hid things in her heart and could not be easily seen. After the necessary formalities were completed, the group entered the Luo Fu. Before stepping into the inner courtyard, the men and women walked separately. Old Madame Luo could not bear it anymore and hurriedly asked the doubts in her heart. Jingwan understood in her heart that she suddenly came back for no reason and scared her grandmother. Jingwan held her arm and hurriedly comforted her. "Grandmother, don't worry. I just missed you, so I came back to take a look. It's really nothing." Old Madame Luo tilted her head to look at her. After looking at her for a long time, it seemed that there was really nothing wrong. Only then was she completely relieved. "You are a Qinwang Fei, an imperial daughter-in-law. How can you run to your maternal home for no reason? Grandmother, are you disliking me and don't want to see me?" Jingwan pretended to be wronged. "What nonsense are you saying?" Old Madame Luo patted her hand. "If it's up to me, I would naturally want you to be in front of me every day. But the rules of the imperial family are very big. If there's a little carelessness, it may cause trouble. Compared to being able to see you, grandmother naturally hopes that you can be well. Grandmother is thinking too much. It's not like you don't know what kind of person our family's Wang Ye is. As long as he agrees, nothing will happen. Moreover, because of the Bai family's matter, the emperor is in the wrong. As long as it's not too excessive, the emperor will not get involved. Moreover, the war in the northwest is in full swing. The emperor has no time to care about other things. Thus, even if other people have opinions, they will also hold it in. It's just that I'm from the Luo family, other people don't dare to say anything about Wang Ye and me. I'm only afraid that they will say that there is a problem with the Luo family's upbringing. It's just a few words of gossip, there's no need to care about it. The person who said this is their own heart that is sour. However, don't rely on Jin Qinhuang's favoritism to do whatever you want. Grandmother's words are wrong. It's because I have something to rely on that I should take advantage of the opportunity to do more things that I want to do. Preposterous reasoning. If you continue like this, be careful that Wang Ye will be tired of you one day. In the end, this was what old Madame Luo was most worried about. It won't happen. Wang Ye and I are very good. Moreover, it will change. No matter how careful we are, it will change. If it doesn't change, it will always be tolerant. All right. With this mouth of yours, there aren't many people who can out-talk you. As long as you feel that there's no problem, then do as you please. Jingwan beamed and nodded with a little pride. Old Madame Luo sighed in her heart. This granddaughter not only was she spoiled by Jin Qinhuang, her temperament was also becoming more and more exposed, and her temper was also rising. This, good, very good. It must be said that Jingwan's change was not only felt by old Madame Luo. Old Madame Luo wanted to talk to Jingwan like before, and then send her to talk to the other young people. Jingwan was not sent away this time. If grandmother's spirit is good, we will stay here and disturb you. Old Madame Luo had some doubts in her heart, but she couldn't think of a reason. All right, as long as you don't dislike this old woman for being stuffy. This time, don't mention Jingwan. The other people also hurriedly said no, and spoke in a joking manner. The atmosphere was harmonious. Jingwan's words were actually less than before, but the others didn't notice. At this moment, Jingwan was really grateful to her own husband. The grudge in her heart towards the person he first fell in love with, who was not the present her, was also dissipating little by little. He remembered all the hardships and tribulations, all the cruelty and darkness, and now he was changing a lot of things with his own strength. If everything was on the original track, then under this roof, there wouldn't be the laughter now. He said that in his previous life, because of her tragic death, grandmother cried until she went blind. Jingwan was very clear in her heart that it wasn't as simple as crying until she went blind. Her previous life in Qi and Fu basically didn't change. It was enough to see that grandmother's body was also in poor health. That kind of grief, it was possible that her life would end in the Yellow Springs. There were also the other people present. Although he wasn't very clear about the others, sister-in-law Sun Yijia, who entered Prince Kang's mansion, didn't escape the tragic fate of a beautiful woman. Now, although her face was disfigured, she was happy and satisfied. Her daughter was more than 1 year old, and the little girl especially picked the good-looking parts of her parents to grow. She was a great beauty, and when she grew up, she might become a femme fatale. Sun Yijia was already preparing to have a second child, and maybe she was already pregnant. When one didn't know, one would do what one should do. But when one knew, even if it didn't happen at the moment, one couldn't be indifferent. Jingwan herself couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. She also understood why her own husband was still unable to forget. Jingwan sat upright and didn't intend to leave. Li Hongyuan also didn't call anyone to urge her, and the others couldn't drive her away. Therefore, until the several men of the Luo family went to the yamen, the first reaction of Luo Peishan and the others was, "What happened?" To them, Li Hongyuan wasn't in the mood to kindly explain. It wasn't until they ate dinner, sat down, and rushed before the curfew, that Jingwan and Li Hongyuan returned to Jin Qinhuang Fu. Luo Shangshu expressed that he was a bit confused, and asked his old wife, "Why did third girl come back with Wang Ye?" Wanwan said that she missed us. Since she was idle, she came back to sit. Is there really nothing? If there was nothing, could she wait until he went to the yamen? But if there was something, why did she leave without saying a word? Old Madame Luo frowned. To be honest, she wasn't very sure. Her own granddaughter didn't seem to be any different, but she did feel that there was something strange that couldn't be said. Luo Shangshu saw this. Forget it, Jin Qinhuang is a man with a clear mind. If something really happened, he would certainly have a sense of propriety. Third girl isn't someone who would be at a loss when something happens. The husband and wife both pressed this matter down and didn't mention it. They would wait for a few more days. If it really was a big matter, there wouldn't be no movement at all. Perhaps it really was nothing. No one stipulated that when a married daughter came back with her husband, they must leave at a certain time. On the carriage back to the Wangfu, Jingwan quietly leaned in Li Hongyuan's arms. What's wrong? You came back to take a look and your mood is down. No, it's just that I can't walk out for a while. It will be fine after a few days. That's why I say, you women are like this. That heart, it's like glass, very easily broken. That's right, you men's hearts are so hard that even a boulder can't compare. Jingwan didn't even think as she lightly retorted. Li Hongyuan held her hand and put it on his chest. Feel it, is it hard? Jingwan pinched twice but didn't pinch. His muscles were really not much different from a boulder. Isn't it just a boulder? Jingwan was unconvinced and patted twice. Li Hongyuan grabbed her hand. Don't tease me casually. I didn't do you in the study this morning. Do you want this husband to do you now? Jingwan felt a certain someone's body had a reaction and lightly spat at him. Pervert. That's right, your husband is a pervert, and he especially likes you. Jingwan didn't come out of his arms. In fact, she also needed to do something to divert attention. She approached his neck and stuck out her pink tongue to lick it. She smiled and said, "This is teasing. Hey, don't move." Jingwan held his hand. Wait until we go back. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes a little dangerously, on purpose. Jingwan's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. Li Hongyuan gently rubbed her flexible waist. Tell me, how many days do you plan to not get out of bed? If you really make me unable to get out of bed, you will suffer from kidney deficiency. Jingwan whispered in his ear, her breath smelling like orchids. She even mischievously licked his earlobe. The strange feeling was too obvious. Li Hongyuan tilted his head slightly and said, even if you don't get off the bed, it doesn't mean that we have to continue to make love. Let's have a good time and then continue after a few hours. For example, we'll start when we go back. When you can't move anymore, we'll rest and continue tomorrow morning. Wan, tell me, if we do this repeatedly, how long can your husband last, and how long can you last? Jingwan's heart trembled at the end of his low and hoarse voice. When he teased her, he only needed to lower his voice. But what about her? This was the gap between them. However, now was not the time to talk about this. Thinking about the meaning of his words, Jingwan couldn't help but soften her waist by 9 points. She secretly wiped away her sad tears. Sure enough, she was still looking for trouble. Yuan, do you think I didn't say anything? No, my ability is questioned by my own wife. No matter what, I have to prove it properly. Yuan, I was wrong, really. Jingwan wanted to cry but had no tears. Well, this can wait a few days. Li Hongyuan indicated that he would listen to his wife now. He didn't make too big of a movement, just stroking and picking slowly. That feeling of being neither up nor down was the most torturous. Jingwan bit Li Hongyuan's clothes on his shoulder, and her eyes were forced to cry. So, even if her physique was good and she recovered quickly, she shouldn't doubt her own man. that would be courting death. After all, in this aspect, most women were actually at a disadvantage. Moreover, in the face of the king of hell, she probably couldn't be strong. She wanted to be a queen, but she didn't know how it would arouse his interest. Li Hongyuan knew that his wife was thin-skinned. In order not to make a sound, she endured a lot of pain. Only when the punishment was almost done, did he show mercy and lift her chin, swallowing all the moans that came out of her mouth. That night, naturally, it was a charming and gentle spring scenery. The king of hell did what he said, and really made Jingwan unable to move a finger. Finally, when they were taking a bath, Li Hongyuan dissolved the contraceptive pill in the water as usual. After he dissolved it, Jingwan grabbed his hand. You said that in your previous life, we had a child. You were poisoned with the sterilization powder. That's an extremely low probability. You didn't encounter it with your wife, but with me. Jingwan's mood was complicated, and she felt that it was somewhat unbelievable. It has nothing to do with us now. Wan, you don't have to think so much. Li Hongyuan expressed that he still didn't like the son. Can you tell me about it? Jingwan couldn't resist the child she didn't know at all. She was especially curious. If she didn't know that someone didn't welcome the child, she wouldn't have waited until now to ask. Li Hongyuan didn't know what to think, but he suddenly smiled with a bit of pride. Wan is right. We were husband and wife for one night, but you got pregnant. It can be seen that even if you married someone else, you should have the deepest bond with me. Jingwan was angry. She was talking about this. Don't try to change the topic. How is the child? Li Hongyuan's expression turned cold. I was the last to find out about the child. You were on the run the entire time you were pregnant with him. You were so skinny that you looked like a bag of bones, but the child was not bad. Do you know how the child was born? According to the last guard left by Fu Yunting, you cut it yourself. Your physical condition didn't allow him to be born smoothly. If you didn't ask me to take good care of him, I would have strangled him to death. I wasn't clear-headed at that time, so I didn't know the specific situation of his birth until later. Otherwise, he would have died. He and I were cut open and taken out of the mother's belly. The meaning is completely different. Ah Yuan. Jingwan didn't know that she would deeply hurt him. Wan, you have to know that the child, even if I gave him the best everything and the best education, I still didn't like him. Fortunately, he was still satisfactory and barely qualified to be your son. Otherwise, I would never recognize him. I would barely keep his life and not leave the throne to him, even if he was my only son. The Jiangshang that I conquered didn't need an heir. I could easily destroy it. Therefore, the child could sit on the throne. First, he was the son of Luo Jingwan. Second, he was qualified to be Luo Jingwan's son. It had nothing to do with him being the only heir of Li Hongyuan. This was probably something that no one thought of. If they knew, those ministers didn't know how many hairs they would pull out. Even if they had to stuff a duck, they would probably let the little prince pass. Even if Li Hongyuan gave Jingwan too much stimulation, Jingwan was still shocked speechless. If it's a girl. Jingwan murmured. If she passes, she will be the empress. Li Hongyuan said without hesitation. https://11/118007/125540553. Mobile edition. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.